So, my first 6 years out of college, I managed fashion events in New York City, which some of you know. And the thing about fashion events in New York City is that these are high intensity, high stress situations with tons and tons of people during Fashion Week coming into the city. And I was in a managerial role, managing 100 plus people, and trying to pull together multiple partners and stakeholders to get these events done. So there was a lot of challenging people, a lot of great people that I was working with, but also a lot of challenging and difficult people. So I was kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool in my first job out of college, and I had to learn how to deal with challenging people and how to deal with challenging situations. So that's where a lot of these insights originate from, as well as over the years coaching and providing training to various people on these types of skills as well, and seeing the kinds of challenges that they're facing. I just want to say, before we get into the nitty gritty, keep in mind what to not do and the wrong approach, I think, at least in my opinion. There's a lot of experts out there on this topic that, basically their approach is to have an emotional conversation with your colleagues. Hey, I didn't appreciate the way you talked to me in the meeting last week, and I just think that it would be more appropriate if this and that. Here's the thing: if someone is being difficult or challenging, chances are they don't care very much about your feelings. And even if they did, which 99% of the time they don't, but let's say they did, that is not a productive conversation, because chances are they're not capable of adjusting their own behavior to satisfy your needs. So a lot of this is recognizing what you have control over and what you don't have control over. And that's a theme I'm going to come back to, but you have to identify what it is that you have control over. You have control over your own emotional response to a challenging coworker. You have control over your own actions and your own behavior. You don't have control over other people. And that's an essential concept. So I want to come back to that. But first of all, keep things professional and keep things focused on work. What I've seen is when you're working with people for an extended period of time, a lot of times in an office environment, people get very comfortable with each other and things get a little too casual, which is understandable. And that's great if you can have a great casual relationship or friendship with a coworker. But the challenge, of course, is that if you're getting more comfortable and familiar with each other, and you just start saying things, or you start communicating in different ways that are not necessarily going to be received well by the other person, that can lead to a lot of miscommunication and a lot of tension in the workplace. So I think being able to make the distinction between work and friendship, or between formal communication and informal communication, is important. I found that for myself, that has saved me a lot of mental stresses and has saved my sanity a lot. Being able to say, okay, this person, I'm not going to agree with them on everything. I don't necessarily enjoy their communication style, but I can work with them. I can deal with them on a professional level. And so that's a distinction, I think, that needs to be made by a lot of people. A lot of people forget that basic concept. So don't get too familiar or too casual. Understand their point of view. Patience is a virtue, as we know. And for you to really level up your game in the workplace and be able to communicate with people in an effective and productive way, it requires you to be patient and to be able to recognize that everybody communicates in a different way, right? As you deal with more and more people and more varieties of people from different cultural backgrounds, different demographic groups, different ages, you recognize more and more that people have different assumptions and different beliefs about how the world works, and they communicate in different styles. Being patient and being open-minded to those realities will go a long way towards reducing your stress levels and also just being more effective and more productive. So for example, some people might just be very blunt and direct in the way they speak, and you personally may not like that. But they're not being blunt or direct because they're trying to annoy you. Very rarely. Most of the time, people have other more important things to worry about than annoying someone at their office or in their work team. So it's not necessarily intentional, but that's just the way they communicate personally. Or alternatively, maybe they're under a lot of stress in their personal life. You never know what someone is going through. You know, their mother-in-law was just diagnosed with cancer. Their relationship is on the rocks and they're going to get divorced sometime in the next 18 months. They didn't get the bonus that they were hoping to get at work. You know, they had a challenging conversation with their boss. There's all kinds of scenarios and situations that might come into play here, right? So, and it's not your job to dig and try to figure out what those situations are, what's going on with them, but just to be aware that there are a lot of things behind the scenes that you may not be aware of. And so that open-mindedness and to the possibility that there may be other stressors affecting them and thereby making them more difficult as a coworker is very valuable, and it helps you to get that perspective and that point of view. Sometimes people just want to vent. You know, sometimes people, that's their communication style. You know, everybody copes with stress in different ways. So for some people, it's complaining about stuff and they just want to vent. Okay, you know, fair enough. I personally may not want to hear that, but maybe that's a reality of how that person communicates. Maybe that's their style. If I'm going to work with that person, again, I don't have to like it, I don't have to love it, but I do have to deal with it and manage it on some level. So, you know, open-mindedness and being aware of these different idiosyncrasies that different people have will go a long way. If you're familiar with Chris Voss, V-O-S-S, this is a guy who's a really interesting thinker in this respect. He is a former FBI hostage negotiator. So this is a guy that has negotiated with terrorists and kidnappers and, you know, the real bad of the bad people. And today he runs like a negotiation consulting firm. And one of his major concepts is something called tactical empathy. Tactical empathy means empathy, meaning understanding the other person's perspective and what makes them tick and their point of view, but in a tactical way. So if you're negotiating with a terrorist, it behooves you to understand their perspective, to understand what makes them tick, what drives them, what motivates them. It's tactical, though. It's not that you accept that point of view. It's not that you justify it or you believe in it, but it's a tactic to understand them and to get into their head. And so applying this concept of tactical empathy is very relevant in the workplace, because if we can deploy tactical empathy, we can understand people and we can adjust strategically our communication style, and also just not just verbal communication, but structurally how we're setting up situations. Am I going to invite this person to this meeting? I know that they tend to get triggered and stressed out and they become difficult when they're around this other person. So maybe if I have the opportunity, I'm going to invite them to a different meeting to get the same thing done, or I'll just CC them on the meeting notes, for example. Thinking about those kinds of things. So deploying tactical empathy makes a big difference. Another major strategy here: offer real solutions to your difficult coworkers. I was coaching a client who had a really challenging coworker. Basically, this guy would ask my client for data, sales data, and the data was available on an internal server. It's there, you know, it's in a folder, like you've seen it. I've told you a million times, like just access the data. But this guy would keep asking him directly again and again. Now, why is he being so difficult? Again, we could psychoanalyze it. Probably we could come to some interesting conclusions about that, but it's not that important. The point is that the person is being difficult, and my client had provided the data, but it just wasn't landing. So what he did, my client, is he reached out to the person. He said, look, just so I understand and I have a better idea of what it is that you're trying to get from me and from my department, why don't we set up a 30-minute meeting later this week so that I can understand your needs better? So in other words, he was offering a real solution. You know, they were basically at an impasse. They weren't getting anywhere. My client was saying the data's already there. The data's already there. The other guy in the other part of the company is asking for this data again and again. So they're at an impasse. The only way to resolve that impasse is for my client to actually offer a solution. This is also very useful. First of all, you might actually get somewhere instead of just being stuck at loggerheads. If you just offer, 30-minute meeting or a phone call or whatever to figure out exactly what is the person's perspective. But it's also very good for you to get a clear sense when you're in the right and when you're in the wrong. Because look, if you're offering real solutions to challenging coworkers and they don't take you up on that offer, then you know you've made a genuine, honest attempt to work with them. They've shot it down. And then from there, that gives you good information. You know, you can deal with that information at that point. Maybe you escalate it to your boss, or maybe, you know, you adjust the way you deal with that person going forward, because you know, like, hey, I gave you a solid effort to resolve this situation. You did not take me up on that, or I've done that multiple times. You have not taken me up on that offer or those offers. You know, I'm not going to take you as seriously from this point forward. That gives you a lot of mental freedom, because a lot of times in these situations, and what I've seen with a lot of my clients and students, is they are unsure of when they're in the right or in the wrong. You know, there's a lot of gray areas in this situation. So by you taking the initiative and actually making the effort to create a solution, even if it's just a small solution, that makes a big difference. And so that can help to advance things. Now, know when to end the conversation, okay? And again, by the way, if anything is unclear, or if you're curious about anything as we're going through this info, like I said, leave a comment in the chat. I'll see those, or you can ask a question in the Q&A in Zoom, and I'll make sure to get to those before the end of the session today. So know when to end the conversation. Related to the previous point of making a genuine offer, offering a solution, and then they shoot it down and say, okay, I can probably end this conversation, right? Experiment with this. A lot of times, like I said, we don't really know, but if we experiment and we try, okay, let me try to make a solution, let me try to make a resolution to this dispute here, and it's just not getting anywhere, you can end that conversation. You know, you have to think about, as a professional, am I being productive? What's the best use of my time here? You know, I've been going back and forth with this difficult person for the last 5 minutes. We're not getting anywhere. The emotions are rising. It's getting more and more tense. Maybe I just end the conversation. I just say, okay, you know what? I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion on this right now. Why don't we pick this up tomorrow? Or, you know, why don't we, you know, I have things to do. You have things to do. We're not going to come to a resolution right now. Why don't we set up a meeting to discuss this next week? Something like that. And, you know, it's totally professional, totally calm. It's not like being agitated or being aggressive or angry about it, but it's just recognizing when things are no longer being productive. And if there's like emotions that start ratcheting up, people are getting angry, maybe you're getting angry or agitated yourself, you know, recognize that level of self-awareness is critical. And, you know, just make a graceful exit. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, you're going to have to deal with this person again and again over time. So you'll see them again. You don't have to resolve every question or every dispute right now in the here and now. You know, you can table things and keep them moving, but it'll also help you, again, to keep your stress levels lower. Another major thing that I recommend to people, this is something that I found really, really works for me. Keep your eyes on the prize, okay? Focus on your personal goals. What is it that you're trying to achieve as a professional, or as a leader, or as a manager in your field or your industry or in your company? Keep your eyes on the prize. You know, if you have a goal or a major objective that you're striving for, not only does that make your working life more enjoyable, but also it forces your mind to focus on that and reduces the focus on these day-to-day minutia issues. You know, these little dramatics or these emotional barbs when someone is passive-aggressive or they make a snide comment in a meeting. All of those little things will eat away at you if you are not rock-solid focused on a long-term goal or a long-term vision for your career, for your department, for your team, for your company, right? So that's something to keep in mind. How much energy and attention are you putting on day-to-day problems and just little things that are going to tear you down? It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, versus focus on the long-term vision and the long-term goal of what you're really trying to achieve. I would say also, don't waste your time trying to come up with responses to like clever zingers or comebacks. This is something I've found a lot of people come to me for advice. They're like, hey, you know what? How do I come up with a great comeback? You know, this person said something to me in the meeting And I wish then I came up with a great comeback like 2 hours later. I wish I had come up with that during the meeting. And then I would show him, this is not a productive use of your time or your energy in most cases. If you're familiar with the TV show Seinfeld, there was an episode where George Costanza, one of the characters, he gets such a bee in his bonnet about the clever comeback and the zinger. And he comes up with the zinger, but it's like a day late to what the guy told him in the meeting. So he has to fly out from New York to Ohio to set up a meeting with the guy's company just so he can have the opportunity to give him the comeback that he came up with. It was complete absurdity, right? But we've all been there because we have all had that desire to have that clever comeback, the suave line or whatever, that Hollywood picture perfect moment. So it's a nice fantasy to have in your imagination, but in the real world, it's not a good or productive use of your time. And the reality is, if you focus on your long-term goals, right, minimize your attention and the energy that you're putting into these minor day-to-day challenges of working with other human beings, your sanity will be much better. Your productivity will be much better. You're going to be just a more effective professional. And because you're focused and you're feeling good and you have positive energy, ironically, that's what will create the opportunity to create those clever, humorous comebacks sometimes. And it'll be effortless. It won't require like a lot of effort on your part. So it's just a challenge I've seen a lot of people have, like just something to avoid wasting time or energy on. Sometimes you come up with it. If you don't come up with a great comeback, okay, no big deal. Keep your eyes on the prize. A major concept is to remain mentally and emotionally bigger than the situation, bigger than the challenging person or people in your workplace. A lot of times we take on a reactive posture or a defensive posture. So this person is difficult. They say something that is passive aggressive, or they say something that is rude or disrespectful to me. And then that creates a reaction, right? I'm reacting now to that. So now my question is, okay, how do I react? Do I react by confronting the person directly? Do I react by going to my boss? Do I react by, trying to change the subject? It's a reactive energy. You don't want to have reactive energy. You want to have assertive energy and big energy, being bigger than the situation. If you're bigger than the situation, people, again, distinguishing between what you can and cannot control. People will say all kinds of things. You can't control that. You can't control their idiosyncrasies. You can't control how they respond to stressful situations or to, their communication style. But you can control your own focus and your own behavior. So for myself, if I'm focusing on my long-term goals, the big visions that I have for my career and what I'm trying to achieve, and I'm much less likely to react to little barbs or little comments because I'm just in motion. I'm being assertive and I'm creating situations. I'm creating conversations with people. I'm creating new initiatives, right? I'm initiating projects. I'm initiating new ideas. I'm not reacting to what other people are doing. I'm creating things just on my own or in conjunction with my allies and my partners in the company or in my industry. And so that forward momentum, ironically, will make other people less difficult because now you've flipped around the energy. Instead of you reacting to them and their negative energy, their negativity, now you're on the offensive. They have to react to you. You see how that works? So by you being in forward motion and initiating things, creating energy, creating situations, creating new initiatives, other people have to react to that. So if you're keeping your eyes on the prize, being productive, being focused and professional, focusing on the work, then that's where you want to be, right? You're much less likely to get distracted by little minor problems and negativity. And those people are less likely to create that negativity in the first place because they have to react to your positive forward energy. So it's kind of a meta concept, but when you really start to think about it, like the people that are most assertive and the most powerful that you've seen in your company or your industry, this is, if you think about it, you analyze them, you'll see that this is exactly what they're doing. They don't have time to deal with passive aggressive comments. They don't have time to deal with, lazy coworkers that are dragging their feet. If the person is lazy, okay, the person is lazy. That's on them. I can't worry about that stuff. I need to focus on what I'm trying to achieve. And so I'll figure out some other way to get things done. So remaining bigger than the situation, creating situations, creating energy, not being reactive, and again, identifying what you can and cannot control. And the last point on the control issue is, and I'll wrap up with this, and then any final questions that anybody has, please feel free to submit a question or a comment in the chat or in the Q&A. But the last point I'll say is the locus of control. So this is a concept in psychology that has been discovered. Do you have an internal locus of control or an external locus of control? An internal locus of control means that you feel that you have control over your life and your career. You might be correct or you might be incorrect about that, but at least if you feel that psychologically, you are much more likely to be happy. So they found that people that have an internal locus of control are much happier and have much higher life satisfaction than people that have an external locus of control, meaning that they feel that their life is subject to forces larger than them. It's hard for me to create a great career because, my boss is just so difficult and he's blocking me at every turn. And your boss may be difficult, by the way. And by the way, just as a quick side note, dealing with difficult bosses specifically, that's a little bit of a different science. So here today, I'm just focused on general concepts for difficult coworkers, but with bosses and people that have formal power over you, that's a little bit of a different story. A lot of the same principles apply, but it's different subtleties. But yeah, maybe your boss is difficult. Maybe your company is going nowhere. Maybe your industry is in decline. There are larger forces external to you that are influencing your success. That is very possible. But, the reality is, psychologically, they've found that people that have that genuine sense of an internal locus of control are happier. And so it goes back to the concept of what you can and cannot control, because some things you obviously cannot control. You don't have any influence over those. So accept it. It's not worth spending your time and your energy thinking about those things, right? So focus instead on what you do have control over. You're going to be much more satisfied and much more happy overall with the overall situation. So those are the major points I wanted to share with you today. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining, and hope you found it useful and beneficial, and I'll see you next time.